Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. You know what? Just as my opinion for now, and it could be because I just finished the movie and I haven't fully processed it yet. My friends gave me the heads up that this one's bad. But you know what? It wasn't as bad as I assumed it was going to be. I didn't like the whole thing, but I feel like I liked sort of like the end of it. I feel like from the point where it's like Thor and all his pals going to fight the villain for the first time, where they're in the like black and white world up until the end. I feel like I actually really liked all of that. It's just everything before that I didn't really like. It's kind of funny. I really, really liked Thor Ragnarok. I think out of the Thor movies so far, that one is easily my favorite. And mostly because it was funny. It's like the first two Thor movies I feel like took themselves really seriously, which is also fine. And then the third one kind of reminded me more of Guardians of the Galaxy. Um, but the third movie was actually funny. And then this movie, I don't know if it's the same person who made Ragnarok that did this one. I feel like in my head as I was watching this, they were probably thinking like, oh, the third one was really funny and people liked it. We should try to make the fourth one really funny too. Except this one wasn't funny. So I don't really know what went wrong with this one exactly. Because a lot of the movie, I'd say like the beginning to the middle, like the first half really, it's like, oh my gosh, they never stop making jokes. And it's just not funny. They have these like screaming goats. That's the part I disliked the most in terms of the humor. It's like I wanted them to I'd rather have less jokes and have them be better quality than having a joke like every 5 seconds or so. Like I'm fine with this like Thor series like being more going in the more comedic direction, after like Ragnarok and stuff. I'm cool with that. Like sometimes the Marvel movies can be funny, but it just felt like it was trying too hard and it just made me cringe sometimes, so that wasn't fun. It's also really weird too because this didn't feel like a superhero movie to me. This is a movie that's actually about cancer and loss, but then most of the movie, like the first half, is really comedic. So it's like, is it a story about cancer or is it a comedy? I don't know. I feel like it just doesn't really balance it well. And there are plenty of scenes that are like serious, especially like even the first scene, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I thought those scenes were pretty good, so I feel mixed in this movie. I will say, like in general, the third movie's my favorite, and then probably the first movie. I feel like I enjoyed this one like a little bit more, but only half the movie. But in the first movie, it felt like the one that was the most serious, but I also really liked it. I think so far I could say 3, 1, 4, 2. I didn't think I'd ever say that, because the second movie was bad, and I heard this one was bad and potentially worse. But you know what? With the second movie, I zoned out so hard. I didn't know what the hell was going on half the time, and I got really bored. Um, like I watched it like 3 weeks ago and can't tell you a single thing about the plot. At least with this one, I was actually paying attention and surprisingly got like a little emotionally invested at the end. So you know what? I liked this one better than the second one. I don't know if that's like a popular opinion or not. Like I don't think either of them are good. This one was like okay, actually. It's just kind of like which one is worse in my head. Okay, what else? I want to talk about the actors. I want to talk about the characters a bit. Yeah, because Chris Hemsworth, I think, is the guy that always plays Thor. I like him as Thor. He's fun to watch. I feel so bad for like Thor as a character though, because he goes through losing like his entire family. He's lost Loki, I think, like 3 times. They literally have like a death montage and everything for Thor of like all the people he's lost and breaking up with Jane. And then he loses Jane in this one. And it becomes like a little happier towards the end if he gains someone new in his life, but it's just like, oh my gosh, poor guy. I like that he has like an actual group with him this time. It's Korg. Korg doesn't have a lot of screen time, but I always like him. You know what? I said the thing about the movie's humor. Korg, the rock dude or whatever, he's still pretty funny. He's still got it, so that's good. Though they reduce him to a head for part of the movie, and then he's not really in it anymore. And then Valkyrie's in this. I really liked her in Ragnarok. I still think she's a cool character. She's kind of going through it too in this one. She ends up kind of becoming friends with Jane, and they have some sort of funny scenes together. But I like her as a character. I'm glad she got to be more of a main character here, where her and Thor are, like, on the same side, where she's like the king of Asgard now. But it's basically like being the mayor of a small town, and she just wants to fight people, and she gets to fight people and do more adventure stuff once like the plot starts, which is pretty cool. And then Jane's really kind of the person the story's about, rather than like, it's about both of them actually, where it turns out that she has cancer, and she ends up taking the title of Thor and being able to wield his old hammer and stuff, and it's like a temporary fix for her cancer, but she's still like dying the whole time. And the thing is, I didn't really care for her character in the first two movies, and she's not even in the third one. Both as like a love interest and a character, I just didn't find her interesting. But then this movie actually did made me care about her just a little bit. It just made me wish, because like you get some like emotional scenes with her towards the end and stuff, especially during like the final fight. And I feel like those moments would have hit a lot harder if the movies actually got me to care about her before this one even existed. I think something else that's kind of weird with this movie too is that they'll have these flashbacks and stuff of like things, really, really important things that happened off screen that you get to see here, including stuff with like Thor and Jane's relationship. You actually do get like a whole montage of them like living together and how they eventually broke up. And I was thinking like, damn, if I actually got to see them do this stuff in the other movies even a little bit, I could have slightly bought their chemistry more, and it would have made me care about Jane as a character. But yeah, or you get to see Thor with the Guardians too. That's how like a lot of the beginning is, which is really cool. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mentioned when I talked about the Guardians movies that my parents are like a really big fan of those, and especially of Groot. And they didn't know this movie existed, and they probably wouldn't have cared, but as soon as I mentioned them, hey, they bring the Guardians back for this one, even though it's only for a little bit of the movie, it's actually probably like 10-15 minutes or so, my parents are like, okay, we're gonna have to watch, your dad and I are gonna have to watch this movie together when we have some free time. And I'm like, okay, cool. And that's just funny to me. If I mention the Guardians and like literally anything, both my parents get so excited. You know what, I'll take that as an excuse to rewatch this movie. I feel like I need to kind of like mentally process it and stuff, which is part of the reason it's nice doing these videos, to kind of talk about it, my notes and stuff, give my thoughts. But I feel like I kind of need to see it again to get like my full opinion. This video is just like, hey, what was my first reactions? Okay, anyway, I just wanted to mention about some of that stuff. There's one more character I gotta talk about, but it'll kind of be sprinkled around my notes, I guess, which is the villain, actually. Which I definitely have some thought. I have some mixed thoughts. But yeah, the beginning of the movie, I actually really like the first scene where it's this dad. His name is Gore. He turns out to be the villain, but you don't know that originally. And he's in this desert with his daughter. She's probably like 10 or something. And he's praying to this god that I don't really remember the name of, for water. Not for him, but for her, because, I mean, they're both dying, but I think the daughter's dying faster, you know, because they don't have any food or water. And the daughter dies in his arms, and then he ends up burying her in the sand, so it's like this little sand mount in the desert. And there's this part towards the end of that scene where he is hugging the dirt mount and laying next to her, and that made me kind of sad. And then conveniently or so, like right after she dies, the god that he was praying to shows up, and the guy finds like a little oasis where there's like plenty of food and water, and there's this part where he's like almost kind of swimming in the water. There's so much of it, and I'm just thinking like, damn, if that showed up like 5 minutes ago, you could have probably saved her. I like the design of the different gods in this movie actually, because you get to see a whole bunch of them. Like in this beginning scene, there's these like flower gods that are made out of like flower petals, and they're sort of humanoid shaped. They look cool. There's a lot of humanoid looking ones, you know, like Thor and stuff. You get to see Zeus in this movie. I think my favorite was there's this one named I think Bao, who's like the god of dumplings, who just looks like a little dumpling with like an animated, like cutesy face. Adorable. Anyway, but no, the god I think that this Gore guy's praying to is named like Rapu or something. Um, and Gore is like, hey, I'm the last of your followers and I'm going to die, and all your other followers like starve to death and whatever. And but we continue to believe in you and stuff, and Gore believes in this sort of like eternal reward for having this faith in like this specific god. And then the god just straight up like makes fun of him, tries to kill him, and says like, oh, my followers, their only purpose is to like die for me and stuff. And then you find out a bunch of the other gods like Zeus also have this opinion as well, and it's just like, damn, dude. But then there's this like spooky sword that i i I think kind of possesses Gore a little bit. It kind of gave that vibe also, because it's like whispering things around him. And Jane and Gore are actually kind of similar, where they're basically both dying because of the weapon they're carrying, but it's also temporarily kind of keeping them alive. It's like draining their life force and also keeping them alive. Where like for Gore, it's this like spooky sword, and for Jane, it's the hammer that she eventually gets. Um, but no, I think it's just Gore like as himself, though not really like possessed or anything. That's trying, because his goal is to kill the gods, because you know they let him down. But then you also see him talk to characters later where it's like other characters who were let down by the gods, which I think is kind of interesting. So his goal is to like to summon the Biofrost and to kill all the gods. I wasn't really clear on what summoning the Biofrost was supposed to do. I mean, I know it works as like a teleportation thing and stuff, but that was one of the parts I felt kind of confused of like, what was this supposed to do? But it might have just been something I missed. Anyway, Gore at this point is the villain. He gets like a spooky villain like transformation as well, where he ends up with these like yellow glowing eyes and kind of looking more creepy. And Christian Bale plays this character. I always like him and stuff. He's like the one performance I got like really invested in this movie. Not saying the other actors do bad or anything, but his performance I got like really invested in, where he like starts out as this like desperate guy, and then as soon as the sword like curses him or whatever, he kind of becomes more like cold and stuff. And then it's interesting because you see him talk with other characters later. Like he eventually kidnaps a bunch of Asgardian kids, and that's kind of what starts Thor on his quest to like go and find this guy and rescue the kids and stuff. And a lot of the time he talks in this kind of like Gore, I mean, in this like soft kind of voice. And then every once in a while he'll like laugh at something or kind of scare the kids or whatever. And it makes him somehow like more creepy. But then you also see times where he'll be like talking about his daughter, and he'll be really sad about it. I have more notes about it later. I just thought it was a really good performance. And it's funny, like under all that makeup and being bald and stuff, I just could not. I feel like Christian Bale got like lost in this character in a sense, which is a good thing. That's a good thing. But it's crazy because every time I looked at this character, I just could not see his face, even though it's like the same eyes. I guess that's good with like the makeup and stuff, but also there's a lot of dark scenes in this movie too, like visually dark. I mean, there's a lot of rock music in this movie. That is one thing I actually really liked with the movie a lot. There's a lot of really good music. They have like a rock version of the Marvel theme. I know they had Guns N' Roses, the song Sweet Child of Mine, which I feel like I need to listen to the lyrics again because I know it related more with like the themes of the movie and stuff. There's one part towards the end where they have the guitar solo, the outro to the song November Rain, and I got so excited. Not even anything to do with that scene, but I absolutely love that guitar solo. It's so good. but yeah, there's a lot of good music in this. And I like how at the beginning Korg is like telling the story to a bunch of people in Asgard about Thor, and then at the end, and it's basically summarizing the other three Thor movies, which is nice because it had like been a minute since I've seen those. And then at the end, he's talking about Jane, and then it actually kind of turns more into like an epilogue of what happened after they defeated the villain. But you get all this stuff about Thor. Like I said, I feel so bad for the guy, but you get to see stuff because I wasn't sure when this took place actually, especially because I'm watching these in the wrong order. But this one, it's supposed to be after Endgame. There's like a whole flashback with the Guardians, which is, at least with that, you can tell it's supposed to be before Guardians 3 and stuff because they don't have Gamora, but they have Nebula and Star Lord's there, and Groot is a teenager, but like slightly older teenager than he was in Endgame, if that makes sense. But yeah, you see that Loki. I wasn't even keeping track on like the Loki dying stuff. I think that's the thing that threw me off with this movie is I was so used to Loki being in the other three movies that not having him here threw me off. And I was also a little surprised because like he dies at the start of like Infinity War, and then they bring everyone back, or not everyone, with like Endgame and stuff from like the snap. But like Loki, oh hold on, someone's home. Okay, sorry, I got interrupted. I think I was talking about Loki, but I don't remember what I was saying. Also, this might end up being a two-parter because I might not finish recording this in time. Anyway, yeah, Loki isn't in this one, which I think I was okay with. There was kind of a lot of characters in this anyway, or in terms of the main group, I feel like he wasn't really needed for this one. But I do also really like Tom Hiddleston as the character, and I kind of did miss him a little bit. I think he's ended up as my favorite character with the other three movies. Anyway, sorry, I had to clear my throat a bit. But yeah, Thor, you have like a whole like flashback thing, or not really like flashback, but summarizing the other movies of like Thor losing everyone he cares about, and you get to see him apparently off screen. He lost all the weight that he gained in what was it, Endgame, Infinity War, whatever. Well, he was with the Guardians, and then you had a flashback thing where he got to do a bunch of like off-screen adventures with the Guardians before the third Guardians movie, but like I think after Endgame. And I thought it was just going to be like a quick cameo or something, but they actually get scenes. They get a bit of screen time and stuff, and that made me so happy. They're such a fun group to watch. Um, but yeah, it's nice to see them all together. Because like Thor at this point has become like a bit more comedic like character, but also series wise. And the Guardians were already kind of goofy anyway. Not that they didn't have their serious moments or so, but it's like the two of them are kind of feeling a bit similar. So it's nice to see them have more time. Thor ends up with a new outfit for a bit. It's the one in this poster. I actually really like this poster. I think it looks cool. Reminds me of like 80s movies posters a little bit, where he has like this vest and stuff. Or just really like the art style of it. Um, but yeah, it's kind of funny to me. Thor's going on adventures with the Guardians, and then Jane got her book published, which is cool because she was trying so hard with the astrophysicist stuff in the first movie of getting her stuff published and discovering about Thor and whatever. But then you also see that she has cancer now. And then her unfunny friend, I think the friend's name is like Darcy or something. It's something with a D, is back. And I felt mixed on that because on one hand, her friend I didn't really like. Not entirely with the character, but just I don't find her funny. She's like unfunny. Um, but I did like her scene in this movie where for once she's not really making jokes about stuff, and Jane has someone to support her during her like chemo treatment and stuff. And her friend gives her some genuine advice of saying like, okay, Jane, you need to slow down. You need to let your body fight through the cancer. And this is actually something that multiple characters tell Jane about. I thought that was actually a good scene. And we get to see a bit more of like New Asgard, where it's like this fishing village, but also has become a tourist destination where Valkyrie gets to be king. It also throws me off with her name because like she is a Valkyrie, as in like the warriors that like fight on the Pegasus and stuff, but then her name is also Valkyrie, so that was something that was kind of confusing me with the third movie. Um, But yeah, she's basically like a mayor, and Asgard has gone from like this magical place of like space Vikings to now it's just kind of like a normal town on Earth, basically. Um, but something I was excited about is they do that play again, like they did in the second movie, where it's like a play put on by the Asgardians and stuff about the previous Thor movie. But this time it's the plot of Ragnarok, but it's only the part where Odin's dying, and then once again this is Matt Damon as Loki, which was really funny to me. Um, and then they even have an actress for Hela. At first, I thought it was Melissa McCarthy. It kind of sounded like her a little bit, but I wasn't sure. I still haven't looked up the cast of this movie. It might have been someone else. But yeah, I feel like I need every Thor movie recapped as one of these plays now. I didn't think they were going to bring that back. I thought it was just like a funny little joke in Ragnarok, but I'm glad they brought that back for this movie. So then Jane ends up going to New Asgard, and it's this thing where Thor's old hammer, the one that Hela broke, like reconstructs itself, and I think it's like trying to protect Jane. It's something you see in one of his, her and Thor's flashbacks or something, where Thor tells his hammer like you have to be able to protect Jane, so then it's protecting her at this time when she's like dying. And then there's these screaming goats you get introduced to. I don't think they have names. I'm actually really what's the right word? It's not mad. I'm disappointed, but I find it kind of a little funny that these screaming goats, which they do sound like the screaming goat meme and stuff, they have more screen time than the actual villain of this movie. That's the thing. I really like Gore as like the villain and stuff. I think it's a cool concept of this guy that's like trying to go around killing the gods. With these like spooky shadow monsters and his sword and whatever. I think it's a cool concept, but he's like barely in this movie to the point where I forget what their goal is a lot of the time. And that, oh yeah, I forgot that Thor ends up getting the goats when he's with the Guardians, and Nebula wants to put one of that down immediately, and I was thinking like, please don't have these ghosts in this movie anymore. You get to even see Kraglin, the guy that has the fin thing from the previous movie, and it looks like he's married now. You only get to see him for like a little bit, but I'm kind of trying to keep track of that because I remember at the end of Guardians 3 it said something of like Star-Lord will return or whatever, so I'm like, okay, I need to keep an eye on like what are all these Guardians characters up to. But yeah, Peter has like a nice conversation with Thor. Like Thor's having an identity crisis, and Peter's just giving a pep talk of like, "Hey, I lost the love of my life too," because he hasn't met Gamora again at this point, and he's like, "You'll get through it and stuff," because that's like kind of part of the message. Like one of the themes of this movie is loss, like losing loved ones and how you deal with it. And I'd wondered between some of the other movies of like, okay, how does Thor end up leaving the Guardians? And it's that he finds out that there's someone out there killing all the gods, and he leaves the Guardians, and the Guardians are completely fine with Thor leaving. But it was nice to see them again. It was like kind of almost annoying to see them with Thor a little bit in Infinity War and Endgame. Just like a little bit to me, because they tried to make it funny and it wasn't. But here it like felt nice, actually. Let me see, what else? You get to see Valkyrie do stuff again. There's like this whole fight with these shadow monsters, and it's when Jane and Thor get to meet each other again. I love that she gets to ride in a Pegasus. I also noticed that for like a good chunk of the movie, she's just wearing a Phantom of the Opera shirt. That was great, because, you know, it's one of my favorite musicals. But Jane and Thor getting to see each other again was cool. And I was like kind of confused at first because like I know that we've seen like Captain America and stuff being able to use Thor's hammer. It's like the whole thing of like less about being Thor and more of you have to be worthy, but then it's like Jane's kind of taken the Thor title, but then like also has his lightning powers and stuff. That part I was like a little confused of like how does she get the lightning powers, and also every time she uses the hammer, Natalie Portman's hair just turns like a bit blonde at the bottom. Not like blonde, but I thought that was kind of interesting. We get some ABBA music a little bit too. I completely forgot about that until I just read it in my notes. I didn't even remember what song it was, but I really like ABBA, so that's cool. And then we got a flashback that I actually really did like, where apparently Jane and Thor lived together and had like a domestic life together, where they're just doing fun stuff on Earth, which I guess also involves Thor wearing a hot dog costume at one point. But I feel like that was the thing that was missing to me in terms of the believability of their relationship, I guess, because you only ever really see like Thor and Jane together in the other two movies, where it's like, other than when he's on Earth for a little bit in the first movie, where it's like they're out there trying to save the day and plot things are happening and whatever, and it's when things are at like a very high stakes stuff, you never really get to just see them together doing like normal couple stuff. So that was really nice to see. I wish we could have seen that earlier. So anyway, you get to see more of their relationship, like after them doing domestic stuff. You get to see how their relationship kind of tumbles, how they're both afraid of loss, that they, I think, kind of both know that Jane will die first, cancer, not, simply because she's a human. I feel like that's always kind of the way it was going to go. You see their relationship kind of go down a bit, where Thor ends up joining the Avengers, and I mean, Jane's busy too with like her career taking off and everything, and then it leads to them kind of arguing about stuff and just growing apart. And I think I really like that, because with the other Thor movies, when Jane's brought up, or I think it's in the third one, I don't remember, it's just something, they just kind of wipe it away of like, oh, she dumped him or something, and that's it. You don't really learn anything about that. And I thought like, oh, okay, that's why they didn't bring her back. And their relationship's kind of, not like I was like really invested in their relationship in the first place, but just kind of treated as a whatever, and kind of an explanation of like, oh, this is why Natalie Portman isn't here. And I just assumed like, okay, they broken up, they're never going to see each other again, that's that. She must just be a character more associated with like the earlier Thor movies. But then no, they bring her back for this one, and they give the whole spiel about like how exactly they broke up. But yeah, I like that it's in a very like human and natural way. Like it could happen to any couple really, of like they're both getting busy and you end up kind of arguing about things and it just doesn't work anymore. And it's not just with romantic relationships, it could be with friendships or any kind of relationship, of sometimes two people just naturally end up growing apart. So I like that it turned out that way and we got to see it a bit. Because at this one, it's that they've broken up, they've grown apart, they're kind of forced back together, and then by the end of the movie, they've kind of fallen in love with each other again. But it ends up kind of sad, where it's like they finally admit they love each other again, and then she dies. It's like a whole thing. But yeah, I that's I think one of the biggest things in terms of like, I guess, added context for the movies. We actually get to see more into their relationship, get the full story. And honestly, with those, seeing Thor and Jane together when they're not off on adventures saving the world, and how they live together and then ending up, broken apart, that felt like it gave more to their relationship than in the first two movies, and made it more believable. That's really kind of all it needed, I think. And then it turns out it's been 8 years since Jane and Thor had seen each other anyway. I didn't think it was that long. I think for me it's because I've been watching these movies only like a week or a couple days or a couple weeks apart at most. So for me it's like one after the other for the most part. And then when the movies are coming out and when they're taking place, it's, like a much longer time. And so that's why it's weird, especially with Marvel movies, of once they're all like not in theaters anymore and they're like a bit older and you can like find them on DVD and whatever, and watching them back to back to back is a weird experience compared to like waiting in real time, for them. It's funny, you get to actually see Matt Damon's character again, not dressed as like Loki in the play, but I guess whatever Asgardian, I'm assuming Asgardian. I don't know, because there's like a bunch of people that live in Asgard, but not all of them are originally from there. Like you get to see with a bunch of the kidnapped kids that sorry, I'm like distracted by a garbage truck or whatever out there. It's being kind of noisy. You get to see that not all of them are originally from Asgard. Some of them are just from other places, and they're just Asgard's, like, new Asgard, I should say, is like home to them now. So I don't know if that's the case for Matt Damon's character, but yeah, I did not expect we'd see him outside of the Loki costumes. That's pretty funny. Anyway, he's in there. He just chimes in. It's like right after the shadow creatures start kidnapping a bunch of the kids from New Asgard, and Matt Damon's character is like, hey, we should make a play about this. And everyone else is just kind of like, what? Because, you know, that's an event that's just happened, that's like fresh in people's mind and treated as like a tragedy, like, bro. And then they have this thing that's like supposed to be kind of funny, but I'm also just like, okay, where I guess Thor's weapons and stuff, like the axe and the hammer, are supposed to be sentient. I mean, I at least somewhat assumed with the hammer, because it like chooses people that are worthy and stuff, and we've seen like Thor use it and Captain America and now Jane, but I didn't realize, what was it, Stormbreaker, I think is the name of the axe, is like also sentient. They're treated as like more sentient in this, but in like a comedic way, where Thor treats his hammer that now belongs to Jane as if it's also an axe. Though it is a little funny that every time he tries to get his hammer back, the axe will just like slide into frame and kind of look at him, not look at him as like his eyes or anything. It's like sort of funny, and Thor, I don't know what's the whole thing with like talking about the weapons and as like X's, because Jane treats the axe in like a similar sort of, or not like a similar way of like, oh, this is my ex, but it's like the way the two of them talk about their weapons, it's kind of weird. And then you get to meet some of the kid characters and stuff, like what's his name, Heimdall, I think, the one that's played by Idris Elba, the gatekeeper guy that died at the beginning of Infinity War. He is a son, and the son has the same ability with the eyes and stuff, where you can like look through someone's eyes and see where they are. And I feel like his character, I don't know if his character is going to eventually end up being important in like a later movie or something, but I feel like he has a son here just so that Thor can like do the similar thing he did in the other movies of like seeing where characters are and what's going on, which is a really cool ability, honestly, because it lets Thor, I guess, astral project himself or whatever into the kids are being kept in like a giant cage by Gore in this like spooky dark place or whatever. So you get like a couple of scenes where Thor's there and he's talking to the kids and he's trying to keep their spirits up even though he has like no plan, and then eventually his plan ends up not working anyway. But yeah, I thought that was interesting that that's like a recurring thing even after characters with those abilities are gone. I mean, you do actually get to see Idris Elba's character at the end of the movie, which is nice. You get to see him in like Valhalla and stuff. So that's pretty cool. I forgot that was like an after credits thing. Sorry, I'm like trying to scroll through. I have so many things written down that's hard to figure out where I am. But I do miss Idris Elba. Not just in this movie, but in like, I haven't seen him in a movie in a while. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, you get a scene with Jane when she's, I think, back in her hospital bed or something, and I think it turns out her mom like also died from what I'm assuming was cancer, and Jane had to go through that as a very young child, so I feel like that's part of the reason she's trying so hard to just kind of keep a smiling face through it. And like a bunch of the characters, even Thor, eventually are like, hey, you need to stay here and, you know, let your body do its thing, and Jane just wants to continue helping with the plot, and you see like more and more of that. Like at this point you see her get to set down the hammer, and she loses all her energy and looks kind of sickly again, so it's like a temporary fix. And why she's all, because I was wondering earlier on in the movie of like, why is she always just like holding it, not like clutching it for dear life or anything. I mean, that's basically what she's doing, but she's always kind of holding it and spinning it around, because like Thor wasn't always holding it. It's only really when he's like fighting and stuff or flying around or whatever. Let me see what else. And then there's this scene I thought was pretty cool where you get to see the kids in the cage again, and it's, I think, like after they get to have their check-in with Thor, and I think one of them is telling a story to the other kids, and then the villain just pops in there out of nowhere, and I was thinking like, what is he gonna do in there? Is he gonna like torment them or whatever? No, he just like scares them a little bit. There was one point where he talks in like a higher pitched voice. I've never heard Christian Bale speak that in that kind of a higher tone, a falsetto or whatever. And it's almost a little creepy. I don't know, where he's like trying to be friendly towards the kids, but in like because like his character is a dad. He does talk about his daughter, so he knows how to act like a normal adult around kids, but it's also like he's like the villain now, or in that kind of role, as this guy who's going around killing all these gods or whatever. So he's naturally just a little spooky now and kind of scary looking. There's one point where he has this octopus creature show up, and he just straight up snaps its neck in front of the kids, and all the kids start screaming and freaking out. But then he also starts talking about his daughter as well. He looks at some girl that's in the group, and he's like, hey, I had a daughter that was like you, or whatever. I think it just makes it interesting with his character, because sometimes he can be kind of like threatening and whatever, and sometimes he's just kind of sad. It's also weird how there's like shadow monsters that he has, and it's like sort of related to like spiders and octopuses. I was like kind of confused about that a little bit, where sometimes he sends out these shadows that come out from the sword, and the shadows are cool where they're like kind of on the ground, like actual shadows, and they move around kind of like octopus tentacles. But then there's one point where he summons this like giant shadow spider creature, and it's like, okay, you gotta pick, is it gonna be octopus tentacles or is it gonna be spiders? I feel like you can't really have both. But then you get to see some of the Thor goes to this place where to like ask the help of other gods or something. You get to see the god of dumplings, like I mentioned, who's just absolutely adorable, and you get to see Zeus, and Zeus is like semi-important. I swear that looked like Russell Crowe playing him. I haven't seen Russell Crowe in a movie in like a while, actually. But yeah, Zeus is there, and Thor is like a super big fan, and then you see that Zeus is kind of a dick, which I don't really follow like Greek mythology stuff very much, but like from what I've heard about Zeus, I feel like that sounds like it's in character, honestly. There's this one part where he removes a bunch of Thor's clothes, and then you see that Thor has like a back tattoo that says "Rip Loki" on it. It has a picture of the helmet, and I thought like, oh man, he's still like missing his brother. And so, I mean, why wouldn't he? But then I was thinking about how much time's passed, because like this movie's after Endgame and everything. And Loki was killed for like the third time all the way back in like Infinity War, which I'm still kind of thinking about, and it's why the Marvel timeline's hard for me to follow. Where then eventually Loki has like his own TV show, but it's like the version of him from like 2012 from the Avengers and stuff. But then it's making me think, like, is the one that got killed in Infinity War just that like more future version of him, or present version, whatever, just like dead permanently? I don't know, man. Anyway, and then I thought they killed Korg, and I got really sad, and Thor also got really sad, and then you find out that he's okay. He just goes from being like a giant rock creature to just literally being a head. Like, all of Thor's allies end up getting like hurt in one way or another, where they can't fight anymore, and I thought that was kind of interesting, where Korg ends up as a head, and Valkyrie ends up getting straight up just stabbed by the villain at one point, and Jane, her powers being kind of taken away by the hammer and stuff. But I think it's just to get Korg and Valkyrie out of the picture after a certain point, so then they can't really fight anymore. So then it just ends up being like Jane and Thor. I thought that was kind of interesting. But you do have them tag along as characters for like most of the adventure, which I don't really like this movie, but I like all these characters together. Well, I still don't really care about Jane as much. I'm just saying I really like Korg and Valkyrie, so it's nice that they're both there, actually. I'm even surprised that Korg, the rock dude and stuff, like lasted this long anyway, because he was supposed to be like he seemed like just like a funny side character in like Ragnarok, and then he gets to be in like Endgame, where he's like playing Fortnite and stuff, and now he gets to be a main character in this one too, which I'm happy about. He's like one of the only characters I find like legitimately funny. It's just, I'm surprised he's had such a lasting impact and everything. And then there's this one part where they're heading to the villain's lair, and they're on this ship. Oh yeah, the ship is being pulled by like screaming goats, which is you don't get to see a ton of them, but I'm just sorry, I've never found the screaming goat meme funny, and these goats are like constantly screaming, they don't shut up. But I think you see like less of them as the movie goes on, but I feel like I just have to bring them up anyway. Anyway, they're traveling on this boat, and they're on an ocean that's in space. You're on an ocean that's like made out of stars. I feel like that should visually look beautiful, especially because like this is a Marvel movie. This is especially a Marvel movie after like Endgame. They got so much money, so effect wise, why does it look so bad? I feel like a sea of stars or whatever should be easy, but instead it just looks weird. I don't know, man. Let's see. And then Valkyrie and Korg get to talk for a while, which is pretty nice. You get this explanation for some reason of like how Korg's race ends up making babies, which I guess ends up semi being important because he does end up finding a partner at like the end of the movie. They don't make like a rock baby or whatever, but you hear about their like mating rituals and whatever. I actually do like that at the end, Korg kind of goes on his own path and stuff and goes on his own journey, and I think ends up meeting this other like rock being named like Dwayne, I think, so that's pretty cool. And then Valkyrie, meanwhile, you know, I don't remember if I caught it or not, but they pointed out here that like the Valkyrie that defends the character Valkyrie, you know, when Hela ends up like killing all her comrades and stuff in the flashback in Ragnarok, that the person who defended her, I think, was supposed to be her girlfriend. Like Korg literally mentions it and stuff, and that's why Valkyrie's really depressed and kind of drunk all the time. Well, not really seeming as drunk here, but like at least so in Ragnarok. But I forgot that loss was like still kind of affecting her, just because she seems so busy with like being, I mean, king, but it's basically like kind of being like a mayor pretty much. But yeah, I like that those two get to talk for a bit, and then Thor and Jane are also trying to have like a romantic moment at this point as well, because it's kind of like the calm before the storm, before they're gonna like go fight the villain and stuff, where Thor is trying to finally confess his feelings to Jane, and Jane is just like, yeah, that's not gonna work, I have cancer. And he's like, wait, what? And this is like, I think, one of the only times I've actually liked Jane as a character, where she mentions about that, and you know, she's trying to play it off as whatever, and Thor's immediately like, hey, this is a really serious thing. I'm actually glad he doesn't ask her like, oh, why didn't you tell me, or get in her face about it, and he's like very respectful about it. But then she's like kind of crying a bit and sort of in denial of like talking about her cancer, like she doesn't really want to admit that she has it, and I felt so bad for her. And then they get to this place, they get to like the villain's lair. I think it's referred to as like Eternity or something, or no, I think that's the place the villain's trying to go. I feel like sometimes with the plot and the villain's intentions and where they are and why, I just felt like I was getting confused, and I didn't know if it was like me not noticing certain details or not paying as much attention as I should have, or if it's like the plot is just confusing. Sometimes with certain Marvel movies, I feel like I just can't tell. But they get to where the villain is, and the movie suddenly turns black and white. That was one of the only things I actually knew about it ahead of time, because I think I noticed that in the commercials, and I had wondered, like, what's the context of that? I actually still don't know the context. They get somewhere, and it's black and white. But the thing that's a little bit of a bummer is, like, it doesn't fully commit to the black and white, because when the characters are using their weapons, the color returns just a little bit, and I was just kind of like, nah. But the black and white is sort of cool, because like those are also the colors for the villain as well, with his like hood and bald head and everything, except that when they're in the black and white world, the Gore's eyes are like this really deep yellow, and they kind of glow a little bit, and it like really kind of pops out when the movie's in black and white. So like that looked cool, but then turning the other characters black and white as well, it made, it's like when they first got there and they're walking around, I was thinking like, okay, this feels very dramatic and kind of weird, but then they all end up getting captured because it turns out to be a trap, and they're all kind of tied up, and the villain's like literally in their faces and taunting them about things and whatever. And then I felt kind of better about the black and white, and then I was like, okay, this is actually kind of cool. It makes it harder to like see things, and I feel like it adds to the whole creepiness factor, really. But actually, that was one of my favorite scenes, where Gore's like having them all like tied up, and he's like magically moving them towards him or whatever, and like making sure they can only somewhat speak, and he kind of just gets in their faces and tells them about how like, oh, the gods have let you down too, huh? And he somehow like figures out all their backstories and whatever. Like he gets really excited about finding out that Valkyrie's a Valkyrie, and he's like, that's really cool. And then he starts talking about like her losing all the other Valkyries and stuff, and she gets like really upset about it. And yeah, that was the point where it's even harder to see Christian Bale's face, where I kept forgetting like, oh yeah, it's him. I'm also not used to him sounding like that too. But yeah, he makes them all feel terrible about their loved ones. And then of course when he gets to Jane, he's saying how like they're on a similar life path of how they're both, you know, like literally dying and everything, and he feels bad. It seems like she's the one that he feels bad for the most. And then they have to fight this like giant spider octopus thing, but it kind of looked more like a spider, and that was okay. At first I assumed like, oh, am I at the end of the movie? Is this like the final fight with the villain? But no, it's actually not. That would have been kind of cool though, but I'm glad it's not, because it's like it's still in black and white, and they're having this fight, and it's like they're like fighting the spider thing, they're also fighting Gore, and I was like, okay, this is sort of cool, but not like edge of my seat. They're doing the final fight kind of cool. And then I realized once they end up getting teleported away of like, oh, okay, this actually isn't the final fight. I'm not at the end of the movie. But it kind of was giving the feeling almost like it was at first, but then they end up getting teleported away because like Valkyrie ends up getting stabbed, and Gore ends up taking Thor's axe and stuff, which he needs to like summon the Biofrost or whatever. And then there's this scene that actually did make me kind of sad, where Jane ends up in the hospital, or it's not in the hospital because of an injury or anything. It's that, you know, she's back there because she has cancer and everything, and she has to take breaks from using the hammer and stuff. And even like Thor's saying, like I mentioned, but you get it in this scene where he wants her to stay in the hospital, and he's like, it's okay, I'm gonna go defeat the villain, you need to stay here, your body needs to rest. Because like at this point he's figured out like, yeah, the hammer is like literally draining your life force every time you use it, you're going to die. And then she's saying of like how she's really happy when she gets to be in the Thor role, and that's probably got to be nice for her too, of like, you know, she's so much weaker when she's in her normal state and everything, and that's probably got to feel awful for her of like everyone else, well, not everyone else, but now it's just Thor at this point of like going to go fight the villain and do all that stuff, and Jane can't help him because she has to be in this bed and can't really do anything. But then with her with the hammer and being Thor, it's like the one time she's able to like keep up and help him and stuff. But he wants her to stay in the bed so she can like potentially get better and they can have a future together, which I was also wondering about, if like even if she had stopped using the hammer at that point, would she have potentially survived? Because like some of the other characters earlier on in the movie say that like the chemo isn't doing anything and she's already at like stage 4, and I actually didn't remember how many stages there were in cancer, but the movie says it's 4 out of 4, so I kind of assumed the entire time she was at death's door and her using the hammer was kind of making everything worse. And it's something I think Jane is very aware of, where she ends up willingly using the hammer and stuff, because she kind of treats the whole movie as like one final adventure basically. And that's the thing, that the scenes where it's talking about her and her illness, or some of the more serious in the scenes in the movie, I feel like are really good, but then it's so weird when you have a bunch of other scenes where we'll just go to something comedic. It's just like this tone shift all throughout the movie, and it's like, gotta pick a lane. But I do think it's interesting they take out Thor's allies at this point, where I thought, okay, it's just going to be Thor against the villain, but then he ends up with those kids, and he gives I do like that he gives the kids his abilities a little bit, like he tells them to go get weapons, and he gives them some of his thunder abilities, and then he goes to fight, no, he goes to try to get his axe back, and the kids are fighting these like shadow monsters or whatever. I also just can't believe it though. There's the meme about like Marvel quips and quips in general, and that line that's always used of like, oh, he's right behind me, isn't he? I don't remember if they've actually literally said that word for word in a Marvel movie before this one, but they do in this one. They have Thor say to the kids about the shadow monsters of like, they're right behind me, aren't they? And I had to just like pause for a minute and just kind of sit there. I thought I like give me a second, I can't. Okay, because Thor Ragnarok to me was like genuinely funny. I thought, okay, we can have like actual funny jokes now. I thought we were past the like annoying quippy like Marvel one-liners. So then to have one of the most well-known ones said like word for word by your main character felt like a freaking jump scare to me. Oh my gosh. But then you get the kids fighting the shadow monsters, and you get the November Rain guitar solo, and then I felt a little bit better because of that. And then from there, like, Thor gets the axe back and he goes to fight the villain, and Jane shows up. And then I feel like from that point onwards, I was like more invested in the movie. I was like okay with it again, even until the end and everything, which is good. It was nice to have a portion of the movie that I was actually like happy to watch, where Jane shows up to save Thor. I had a feeling she would. I mean, I didn't know from like watching the beginning of the movie or anything. I was kind of, I didn't even think about like, oh, is she gonna die by the end of this movie? Like, even as soon as it's revealed she has cancer, or about like the hammer draining her life force or anything, I just thought like, okay, I'm just gonna watch it, we're gonna see what happens. I don't know, because I was even thinking like, oh, maybe the cancer itself would kill her, or it would be the hammer, or maybe she survives. I don't know. But no, they have it be the hammer. But I like that it's her choice. Like, Thor tells her like, hey, you need to stay in this bed, you can get better, we can have a future together. And then she shows up to save him, and I mean, I think he did kind of need saving at that point. He was struggling a little bit, and she shows up, and Thor's actually upset about it, and Jane is showing up knowing that she's going to die. Basically, she's basically choosing to die to save him, which has happened to like several characters related to Thor. Oh man. But then they get to fight the villain together, and that was pretty cool, and they have like this choir music and stuff, and that really fit the vibe. And then they got teleported to like eternity or whatever, and it was really funny to me because they get teleported to this really chill place that has this like pool of water on the bottom, but it's not underwater. And as soon as that happened, I thought, oh, okay, they're just being teleported to like the final boss arena in Skyward Sword. Nice. But it was a cool location. At first I actually thought like, okay, is their fight gonna continue? But instead there's no more fighting. They don't actually kill Gore or anything. What instead ends up happening is that Jane is dying in Thor's arms, and then Gore is like talking to them and stuff and saying about how he wants his daughter. And then I was sort of understanding things a little bit. I guess there's this like space looking being, I didn't even realize it was like sentient or not, that I guess you can make wishes to, and he wants to make a wish to this eternity being to bring his daughter back to life, and Gore's kind of debating it, and Jane and Thor are helping with him on that of he wants to see his daughter again, but he knows that he's dying, and he's worried if he dies he's gonna leave her all alone. And Thor and Jane are telling him like, yeah, you should bring her back anyway, it'll be okay. she won't be alone or whatever. But I totally get why he's worried, because that, I feel like that would be even worse actually, of like you get, like, he'd get to see his child one more time before he dies, but then he's leaving her to fend for herself. But I like that what causes Gore to kind of lose the, I guess, corruption of the sword, or what it seemed like, was he sees Thor holding Jane and he thinks back, and you literally see it as like a little flashback thing of him holding his own daughter as she's like dying and stuff. And he brings his daughter back to life and dies in front of her, and then he tells Thor, like, you're gonna have to protect her or something. And I thought that just meant like, hey, keep an eye on her and bring her to New Asgard, but it actually means something else. I'll get to that in a minute. And the music in this whole scene where everyone's like dying and stuff was really good too. But the thing I was surprised about I can't believe I was surprised this ended up happening. It's such a good, this whole bit when they're in the like eternity place or whatever, but especially Christian Bale's performance as a dying father was so good. I actually did like cry a little, I'll be honest, not like full on in tears or anything, but I got a little leaky, and I paused the movie and I was surprised about that. I'm like, I thought this movie wasn't, everyone told me this movie wasn't supposed to be good. Why am I crying when I only care about like one of these characters, you know? Like I sort of care a little more about Jane, but that's kind of about it, and we've barely seen the villain in this movie at all, and I care about Thor as a character, but this was actually a pretty good part. I actually did get emotional, and like so far that hasn't really happened with many of the Marvel movies. I think it's happened with at least one of the Guardians movies. I know that happened to me the first time I watched 3 with seeing like Rocket's backstory. I think Endgame gets me a little bit. It was either Endgame or Infinity War, I don't remember. But so far with the other Thor movies, I didn't get emotional over anything. I was just like genuinely surprised with this one that I did. But I really think it's just Christian Bale's character. Something about it just gets to me. But yeah, it is like a nice scene, and it was kind of a nice surprise because, you know, it seems like so far with the other Thor movies, it's like they're beating the villain and they kill them or they die and they win and that's it. But here it's like they don't kill the villain. He dies by his own means, and it's kind of, everything's just more sad because like everyone's dying and Jane or whatever. Anyway, then it goes to this whole epilogue thing where Jane is seen as like a hero of Asgard, as like also having the title of like the mighty Thor. And you see Valkyrie giving the kids like self-defense training and stuff, which is pretty cool. And then Korg's kind of going on his own journey, and then you get to see with Thor, which I actually thought was really nice. He ends up becoming a single dad where he adopts Gore's daughter. I didn't think it was going to turn that way. Like I mentioned, when Gore says something of like, oh, take care of her for me, I thought that just meant, okay, she's going to go like live with all those other kids on like New Asgard or whatever. But no, he ends up becoming a single dad. Though she ends up calling him like uncle and stuff, which is fair, you know, like she still has like the memory of her dad and stuff. And it's kind of sweet. You see him like making pancakes for her or whatever. And I didn't even realize that she, you know, came back different and stuff, in that I'm assuming she was like a normal person, didn't have like magical abilities or anything when she was originally alive. But because she gets brought back by the eternity, whatever really happens with that, it was still kind of confusing to me. Or it was confusing if like the eternity ends up just taking her shape or something. I don't know. Or she has like magical abilities now too, or something, or like godlike abilities. But yeah, it looks like they'd left Asgard and they're traveling around in some kind of like spaceship or something, but not in outer space. They're just, I guess, kind of doing the thing that Thor was always doing of like traveling around and fighting people and
defending people who can't defend themselves and stuff, and then you find out that's the reason the movie's called Love and Thunder, because that ends up being the nickname of like him and his kid, which I thought was kind of sweet. I just assumed it was called that way because most of the movie is about like Thor reconnecting with Jane, but then it turns out to be for this reason instead, which was like a little weird, but I thought, okay, that's kind of nice. But yeah, I think it's interesting. He ends up becoming a dad, and I like the way it's framed through the narration, where it's like Thor, you know, has lost like his entire family, and like a lot of his friends, and he just lost Jane, and they like really hammered in at the beginning of like, this dude is like so broken. So then and I fully expected like once Jane died, he was gonna go back to being like miserable again, but then it's framed in a nice way of like he kind of has something new to live for, of like taking care of this child, and he seems happy with it and stuff, and he seems like a good dad. So you know what, I think I'm cool with that. I think it works out nicely if he has someone in his life to hang out with, because like I thought it was going to be Jane, but then he ends up just having a kid instead. Actually, at first when they mentioned Korg says some line of like, oh, he goes from sad bod to dad bod or whatever, I thought that somehow meant that him and Jane had a kid, and then it's revealed it's the little girl, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes like way more sense. Especially because like some of the characters were like joking about it or whatever, of like, what if they eventually had like a kid or something. But I'm glad it's like this other kid that he ends up adopting instead. And then the credits were really cool too. They used so many different like typefaces and stuff, which I thought was kind of a lot, but like stylistically the credits I think were really fun. And then you end up with the after credit scene and stuff, which I just skipped through the credits a little, where you get to see Zeus, and I thought, oh, okay, Zeus, you know, didn't really like Thor anyway, he's gonna be the villain. And then it turns out he's talking to Hercules, who we haven't seen throughout this whole movie, and then they have that thing that says Thor will return at the end, so I'm assuming there's gonna be another one of these where he's gonna have to fight Hercules, which that sounds kind of cool. I mean, I assumed when they're introducing all these like other god characters and stuff that they were going to be some kind of thing for like a potential next movie, but then you also see that Jane ends up in Valhalla, you know, because she had that sacrifice and died in battle and stuff. I don't know if that means we'll get to see more of her in the future, or if it just means like, okay, she sacrificed herself and died and she gets a happy ending. I feel like I'd kind of prefer it, especially because so much of this movie was about her and this like final sacrifice anyway, and her dramatic death scene. I feel like it would be nice if we just didn't see her again, like having this little ending in the credits where she basically goes to like warrior heaven and stuff. I feel like it's kind of a good point with her whole journey and everything, and she'd reconnected with Thor, and he gets to kind of move on and going on more adventures and stuff. I feel like it ended well. I'd actually be kind of annoyed if they brought her back. I feel like it would take away some of her sacrifice and character development within this movie, but it's nice you get to see where she ends up and stuff. And Heimdall's there too. So yeah, I'm assuming there's going to be more of these because, you know, Hercules is there. But yeah, I think this is pretty good. I think what's been fun with me with watching the Thor movies, I mean, you have that with like a lot of the Marvel movies, but I guess because these are the only ones where I've actually just watched everything at this point and like sort of going in order, is just seeing Thor's whole like character development and everything, where he's like kind of full of himself and stuff in the first one, gets kind of a bit humbled, ends up losing his home and his family and his friends and also Jane. It's like in every Thor movie he's losing someone. I felt really bad for him actually. At first I just assumed it was his parents, and then like Loki's gonna keep coming back, and then it's like so many other people and losing his home. And it's kind of interesting, his whole like thing of, yeah, you're gonna be the king of Asgard at like the beginning of these movies, and now it's not just that he's like given that title to someone else, and he doesn't even live in Asgard anymore. He's just off doing his own thing. But I feel like that kind of fits with the way his character developed here. But yeah, I was surprised. I actually did kind of like this. I'm not saying it's like good in my opinion. I agree with my friends that it isn't a good movie, but I can't say it's completely bad either. I'm just gonna give it like an okay, in that there was a lot of stuff I didn't like, but the stuff that I did like, I liked, if that makes sense. And I could like 100% say I liked it more than the second movie, The Dark World, because like I said, I found The Dark World boring as hell and I can't remember anything of it, and that to me is a sign of being like a worse movie. If I can't remember it and can't enjoy it, might as well be as if it didn't exist and stuff. Compared to this one, where there was some stuff that was like bad, but there was also some stuff that I liked and things I actually like genuinely paid attention to. But yeah, I wouldn't buy this on DVD or anything if I found it at like a Goodwill. But yeah, the third movie out of all of these, I'll be honest, like the Thor movies, it's like half of them are bad, half of them are good. The third one's my favorite. I am delighted to have that on DVD. The first one, like I said, that's like my second favorite, but at the same time, I feel just okay about it, really. I mean, I have it on DVD. Maybe I'll watch it again at some point. I don't know. But I like Thor as a character in these movies. I think he's fun. I hope we get to see Loki again at some point too, because he was sometimes like the comedic backbone of some of these, honestly. But yeah, I'm interested to see if there's a potential next Thor movie, what that's going to be like. I'll probably watch it. And yeah, that's probably going to be it for me with Marvel movies for a while. I mean, in the future, I'd like to watch some of them. The ones I've always been curious about were Captain America. If I end up going to my aunt's house and getting to use Disney Plus at some point, because that gets to happen every once in a while, whether I like dog sit or I'm just visiting for the day, maybe I'll check out more movies, or if I find any more at Goodwill I'm like actually interested in that I might want to have on DVD. We'll see. So it's something I'm going to put a pause on, but it was nice to go through some of these and some of the Avengers movies and Guardians and stuff and these Thor movies. It was pretty fun. All right, thanks for watching. Bye bye.